it might be ready in 8 weeks, but sometimes it could be another 18 or 20 weeks. So in other words, basically, getting a start with in the underwriting, he said they could work up to week 7, and then we're basically on the books in terms of the underwriting process. And then uh, and then they don't want to basically complete the underwriting until they have uh, the permanent cost of the project. And so, and in terms of the construction component, that's not done until you get way out toward the end of uh, you get where the construction drawings are completed, and then basically, the contractor works with builders to get a firmed up cost of construction. Um, I'm going to pause there and see if you got any questions. There's a method to how the orientation is on the timeline here, kind of with both entities working, in their own accord. But I'm going to stop right there just on those first point two, point three in the talking points, see if you had any questions.
So I think you answered this last week, but just want to confirm for the rest of the board. The final price that would be included in the bond or the financing essentially would not be determined until, that would be during that 7 week period on when we get the final quote from Stocks and Taylor. Because I know, like right now, the number we've been using is 10 million as a placeholder.
Yeah, so right,
Wrong
so
bond.
we've been using 4 million just for the project, the new
Right.
project, right? But that actually wouldn't be firmed up. We'd be out on another 5 months, Joseph, somewhere out there, July, end to end, because the schematic design is done first, and then design development, construction drawings, but the cost budget at the 8 week mark is not the final, fixed number. And so uh, we wouldn't have that until the contractor gets through, this phase, which is about a 5 month, window of time. So we'd be out somewhere August, right? And then at that point, once the cost of the project is firm, then that number would go back to Ziegler, who would technically kind of be up through their process to their week 7. And then they would pick up the remainder of the underwriting sequence. So if you think about it, at that point, they would pick up the remainder, the underwriting sequence for the bond issuance.
And then the amounts you have here in your bullet too.
Mhm.
I know the schematic design definitely, which we'll talk about that tonight. But the other three, those are potential costs that we would have to front outside of the bond. Is that correct?
You'd have to what, Joseph? I'm
We would
sorry.
have to front those funds outside of the bond.
Yeah, so if you and these would be in sequence. So I talked to Selin today. We so once we start, they'll do schematic design, and then they'll move right on to the design development construction documents. So uh, over that period of time, um, their cost would be a component of and I'll just use where we are with the $4 million part of the line that we're going back to Ziegler with, right? Because we're refinancing existing debt, and then we've basically projected about a $4 million new project costs, and embedded in that is basically would be the funding for Stocks and Taylor. And we'll have to pay for some of this, up front, because we won't be through the bond underwriting,
Right.
right? And then we would recapture it once we had finance from the bond sale, back to the school.
And then also, I know we've talked about this, but just to clarify for everyone, we need to get through these first three phases: schematic design,
Right.
design development, and construction drawings before we'll have a firm proposal from Stocks and Taylor.
In terms of the construction costs, you're correct.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of put these dates I put in here are not obviously not hard. It's just basically what I wanted to give the board an idea is that if we were to basically kind of start on this next week and then run things out, that's where those dates come in. But so the bond underwriting, that May 19th for bond underwriting, having talked with Scott today, obviously that would be much farther out because it's a function of getting the actual cost of the project. And so let me see, let me scroll down. Can you scroll down just a little bit more, Austin?
Yeah.
Thank you. And so you know, in talking with Sheldon today, this basically would be a fairly aggressive timeline to get through this first part with him. I call it the document set, and then to essentially line up uh, with about a year to do the construction. Um, and that year construction is not a guarantee, but just so the board understands that, we're trying to work off that August 2026. Um, basically in my view, if that slides a little bit, let's say, we're under construction, but it's not quite complete by August, then we would probably slide a little bit into that 26, 27 school year, September, October. Um, right now we're just trying to project as best we can. Um, of how that timeline would look hypothetically, and if everything was a fairly straight line and worked out really on time in a more perfect scenario. Um, I did put in bullet points 5 and 6. I just kind of wanted to demonstrate for you all, and again, this is keeping within the $4 million frame on the project. And uh, from the perspective of a per square foot cost, um, on the relative high side, $300 a square foot. Uh, Selden's team is projecting about a 12,000 square foot building. Of course, that would be about 3.6 million. If that per square foot cost was the actual amount. Um, that's probably high, but figure start high. And then you kind of see a breakdown against that 4 million. Um, the new building, the money that would go to Stocks and Taylor on all their documentation work. It's about $50,000 to demo both of the buildings. They won't be demoed at the same time. And then I put the net remainder, and this is again at $300 per square foot, 133.5 for uh, uh, furniture, fixtures, equipment, and existing building maintenance. And then in bullet point 6, I just showed that relationship. If in actuality the project came in at 275 a square foot, and basically the same calculus. Um, and that's just to give you again a sense of timeline and what Stocks and Taylor will be working on up to the point where we would be in a finalized construction number. And then on the other side, what Scott Rolfe and his team would do on the underwriting. Um, and so it's not uncommon. He made it clear to me, hey, you get started, we get up to our week 7 point, then basically your underwriting is on the books, and they're basically they're in a not so much a holding pattern, but they're at basically a stop point until we get the firmed up project cost back to them. And it's not abnormal for that can be several weeks. He said it could be, he's had clients come in where it's 10 weeks, 18 weeks, 20 weeks, after that 7 week, point in their timeline.
And what would be, Austin, the plan, once the demolition of building 4, for the 25-26 school year? Do we have, I mean, have you thought about what we would do to relocate those services to another facility while that building's gone?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know if I was muted. Um, we're gonna relocate. We've got ideas about what we're gonna do with what's in building four. So Children's House will stay there. Um, and then we've got some space in that building where we can move some things. Um, so we'll have to get tight with our space for a little while, but we've got several sort of scenarios that we've planned out for how we'll handle that space or
And
the things that are in building four.
building four, isn't that primarily encores? Is that right? Or you
It
also
is. Mm-hmm.
for the rest of the board, with what Rick has presented so far, any questions? I know I'm asking a bunch, but I want to make sure everybody gets their questions answered.
I do want to come back around on the amortization
Yeah,
after.
let's if we can finish this up, if you're ready for it, Rick. At this point, I would entertain if you can go back up to the top, Austin. Kind of what Rick described, regardless of what we talk about next with Ziegler, in order to continue the process and stay on track timing wise, getting that firm estimate for the construction cost and design of the building, we do need to move forward with Stocks and Taylor, regardless of what we decide on financing. So, with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve authorization for Rick and Austin to move forward with schematic design phase of $53,500.
I'll make a motion for them to move forward with the schematic design.
I'll second.
Robin and Jamie, any opposition or further discussion? Okay. Rick, you want to keep rolling with the
Okay,
list
yeah.
documents from Ziegler?
So the second part is Ziegler, and so basically, and I did you all have a chance to look at the three? Scott did send a 30 and a 40 year. And Austin, can you scroll down on this document? I think I keep going. Hope I put them in there. Oh, there we go. All right. So if you get to on the bullet points here, if you get to items 7 through 9. Uh, what I did here was, and then as you go back into the most recent proposal that Scott sent, the amortization uh, options are on slides 21, 22, and 23. But what I wanted to show here in points 8 and point 9 is in any of these amortizations, the first 3 years would be interest only, and then we'd pick up principal and interest after that. So basically in point 8, I'm, I'm, I'm giving you a comparison between a 35 and a 40 year amortization, just with the interest only years, which would be the 25, 26 through the 27. Did I get that right? Um, 26.
That probably should be 26, 27.
There we go. 26, 27. I thought I was losing my. No, actually, that's right. That's right. It's 27, 28. So it'll be the 25, 26 through the 27, 28 school years. That's 3 years. Sorry about that. Been looking at this laptop too much today. And so interest only on that amortization is 576,038 per year. And so when you look at the operating part of our budget, that would require an increase over our current um, long-term debt line of 128,471 each of those 3 years. What we currently have right now is 447,567. And then the same goes for then I have the 40 year amortization, interest free, the interest only. First 3 years would be 584, 313 a year, and that would be a increase of 136,746 in each of those 3 years above our current. Just so you can see, what the actual dollar amount would be there.
So, question before you move on to the next: what do we tend to average um, that we roll over from year to year? all bills paid.
Yeah, so right now, last year we rolled about 132,000, and then basically on next year's projection, which is a function of our enrollment staying on, our work there. Um, and so without looking at I don't have that 5 year up in front of me, and if I tried to go get it, I'd probably shut this screen down. But um, you're looking at a on the I think for the next school year, I had about 300,000 projected net on the budget, Joseph. And so we would cover these amounts from that. And then it'd be about 300,000 a year. I'll just say without going back into that budget for
And
20.
what's making up that 300,000? Is that cost reductions on other items, or
Well, it's actually a function of one enrollment. So, we have to stay on the path, particularly up in the secondary level. This would be for the next 2 school years, getting out in the neighborhood of 440, 443 on enrollment held. And then you take that multiplied by the current per student rate, which is about $7,000 a student. But if you go back into the 5 year budget on the out years, um, that carryover number, Joseph, the only increase you see year to year is based on our student enrollment, because I flatline in each of the out year budgets. That would be 25, 26 through all the way out to 28, 29. I'm flatlining the EC component, which is 322,000 and change. So like in the current biennium, that's all we got uh, outside of student ADM this year and last year. Nobody knows what that's going to be in the out years. There's a lot of discussion, about that. And the other thing I flatlined was basically our district remittance. So when you look at those out year budgets, you'll notice that uh, in terms of projected funding for EC, our Title I funding, our IDA funding, I flatline all of those based on what we got this year. And generally, the district remittance goes up a bit year to year. Um, and then our grant funding, uh, stays relatively in proximity with what you're looking at. It might go up a little bit here and there. Um, so, and then I kind of kept the rural ed grant in there basically at 1 year at a time. So, but I kept those all kind of relatively fixed, um, to get out to where, um, we have that net of 300,000. And I think in 28, 29, to achieve the full enrollment, what we're looking at about 455 students somewhere out there, then that net would be higher in that out year.
yeah, I'm following you on that.
Okay.
Did you have it? I mean, I saw in their proposal, but I don't see it here to really look into the 30-year option, or is that just not something
Well,
that we?
yeah, the 30 year option, it's essentially what you're looking at. It's a higher cost. If you look back at the 30 year amortization, and the
About
interest,
43,000 more than the 35.
right? Yeah. And if you look at in point nine, Joseph, and the other folks on the board, when you get to the principal and the interest payments, then combined 35 and 40 year, you're looking at 685, 665 um, per year respectively. So that would, at that point, which would be the 28, 29 school year, you'd be looking at needing to add 217,000 on top of our current 447. So um, So to me, there wasn't really too much of a trade-off between 35 and 40. I know it's 20,000. It's about 20,000 a year difference. And obviously the 30-year would be higher than that. So if we're looking at
Well,
you know,
what I was looking at between the three option was, I mean, over the course of the 30, 35, or 40, it's kind of a stair step, about $2 million additional in interest.
yeah,
Whether you look at 30 to 35 or 35 to 40.
right, right. And um, if you kind of look at the you know, that's the interest cost there out that over that period of time. And so, that's in relation to, what Ziegler, again, this is kind of, for the board tonight, it's kind of, for, motion and approval to kind of get two wheels in motion, one with the schematic and what Selden's got to do, and then the other side is with Ziegler. And these out year budgets, you know, it, the variables that we don't have control over, as we talked last year, just doing a projected budget for this year. We won't know what our actual state funding will be. The General Assembly is doing a biennium budget. Uh, generally they don't get their work done by June. We all know that. On the last biennium, we were almost into the middle of November. The biennium before that, while I was still at ECU, it was the end of January after the June. And basically the thing that we have control over is basically, student enrollment numbers and then doing the arithmetic on state ADM based on our current year. And then I think year three, I bumped up the per student projection to 7,500, but and just so you can see what that would look like if that were to be achieved. But like I said, we don't know, what the per student amount will be. We just and even when basically if you look at 25, 26 in that budget profile, you basically are seeing next year's budget in pro forma already, which we'll talk about, next month as just next year's school budget pro forma. Um, but you're already seeing it as part of this. And the other thing I did in these out year budgets is I did like for next year, I did a 3% increase on salary. And I also increased operating 3%, and that's before, adding, a component for an interest only um, obligation on the bond funding.
So I remember before we talked about, there's essentially an application phase that we have to go through with Ziegler. As a part of, if we give the go ahead tonight to start that process,
Mhm.
we also have to make the decision now between the 30, 35, and 40, or is that decision made at a later date, or do you know?
I can ask him that. God, I talked with him for 15 minutes and I was like, yeah.
Because where my hesitation, and I definitely want the rest of the board to chime in, is, and maybe you know this off the top of your head, but the seriously consider, is the 30-year option something feasible?
Mhm.
As we kind of talked about last week, some of the building with age, and this is a very, very long-term commitment, a commitment that definitely needs to be made in a building that needs to be built for Children's House and the rest of our students. But with that in mind, if we can save $2 million in interest over the next 30 years,
Yeah.
then I definitely think we need to do that. But on the same note, if it's not feasible, then that's where we have you to tell us that it's just not going to work. Um, Rest of the board, I mean, anybody, love to get your thoughts, questions.
And one thing, let me one thing before you all on that is looking way out in the future. And I know I'll just put it out there. When you look at public charter schools and equity funding for infrastructure. Um, one of the things that was talked about at the summit that Austin and I went to um, the week before last, and it comes up every year, and it's been discussed for 20 years, but there's really been no movement in the legislature. There just hasn't. Um, but the thing of it is over the next, 10, 15, 20 years, uh, will the orientation of things in the legislature change? Meaning there would be support and support to the degree where actually there's a funding bill that would allow public charters to access state funding, whether it's from the lottery or the other funding accounts for buildings. So um, don't know if that'll ever happen, but we have to assume that it may not. But if it does, and let's just say hypothetically it happens somewhere beyond that 7 year lockout period here, and the school could access that, to cover existing long-term debt, then, uh, there might be, a way to further reduce by not having to do the whole obligation, but that's way out there, and that's very, very hard to determine at this point. Um, and it's frustrating because we have the same discussions about funding for EC. It's been bantered about for over 10 years about that funding should change based on what the students' individual needs are instead of just a flat rate. And I'm not the only finance officer in a public charter school. We have no school what that calculus is. When they give us 322,000 and change, well, we don't have any idea what the calculation is. Is it based on the number of students we have in EC or at the 12%? I don't know. So
Joseph, I think that the 30-year is kind of where I would like to go too, just to be able to save that 2 million sounds like, it'd be such a great savings. I do get a little nervous if we have to grow that much. I know we've talked about growing and we want to especially grow the high schoolers, but like if we don't, or if it doesn't grow like we, every year what we need, are we still in a good place to be able to pay this off? That's the only concern I have. If we just stayed exactly where we're at right now, is this still feasible at a 30-year?
um, it would be much tighter, I'll be honest with you, Sarah. Yeah. Um, so, I mean, it's if you kind of look at the um, the increase to the obligation, and then particularly when you get to the principal, once you hit year 4 and you start bringing in the principal and the interest on top of it, and because that would be somewhere around the 28, 29 school year. So to your point, if we're short, um, and again, the difficult thing is we don't know what the per student rate's going to be, one biennium to the next, um, and uh, and so it's basically looking forward to um, to Joseph's point. I mean, but really from the school's point, I mean, we have to do something as we've talked about, with respect to Children's House and Building 4. I mean, those are modular units. They're both well over 20, almost 25 years old. And so and there's a lot, and they're modular. They're not, you know,
Yeah. No, I agree. We need to definitely build. I just was worst case scenario thinking numbers that, you know,
I get it.
Jamie, Sarah, Robin, any thoughts right now? Or
I was
Sarah, I meant
just
Jeremy.
kind of back of the napkin looking. The 35 year seems to be a sweet spot. in relation to what our payment will be once we're beyond the first 3 years. The difference there, and it still saves us off the 40 anyway. It still saves us about 3 total, 2.6, 2.3, 2.5 maybe. It's certainly worth considering that one. Just like Sarah was saying, we're not certain. Yeah, there's uncertainty built into it already, but the shorter is the better. If it comes down to we can do 30, Rick is comfortable with that. I'm good to go with that. But at least the 35 um, is an advantage over the 40 that I think is swingable looking at the numbers.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jamie. I'm definitely not in favor of the 40. That's a lot in a very long period of time. But I mean, Rick, correct me if I'm wrong here. The Ziegler decision. I know we want to make a decision as soon as we can. Um, However, with what we've already approved tonight, moving forward with Stocks and Taylor, that's going to keep us on track for the moment, timing wise. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. So, uh, but yeah, it'll keep us on track. I mean, and just remember with um, the and I don't know how if the board wants to do it because you approved the schematic design, right? So you want us to come back at the next waypoint just to go back on Stocks and Taylor? The board with, I can't remember what the second, can you scroll back up to the top of the document, Austin? Sorry. When we get to, once we cross the threshold where his team's ready to work on the design development, let's come back.
Yes, I'd say, especially since we in tonight's agenda specifically had the schematic
Okay,
design.
I just want to be, that's fine. I just want to be.
Yeah, what I'd recommend is, for next month's agenda, if you wanted to come back and ask for approval for both of those next two steps,
Okay.
then we can go ahead and vote on that.
Mhm.
Um, Interested, the rest of the board, please feel free to speak up. But I think at this point, my personal opinion is I'd like to see, Rick. I love what you did here with the 5-year budget. I spent several hours over the past couple of days diving through what you've got here, and you've done a great job. But if you could really dive into the numbers a little bit more specific to the 30-year option, kind of like what you've
Okay.
described here below, and bring that to us in March, or if you can, send us something to review ahead of the March meeting, then
Right.
maybe we can make a final decision at that meeting.
Okay.
I'll open that up to the rest of the board. I'm one person, so if y'all all feel very strong about another option, we can definitely entertain that here tonight.
I agree with that. That'll be good to get the information, more information on the 30-year option to look at.
Okay.
Yeah, agreed. I definitely would like to make a decision in March if everything looks good, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, where I feel comfortable, and that's what I wanted to confirm with Rick, and just for everybody's sake, I think we're all committed to the timing of where we're at. I think allowing them to move forward with the schematic design phase is definitely a huge step in that direction. And from a timing standpoint, at least for now, we're not holding things up. It's going to keep things moving forward. But yes, I completely agree with you, Sarah. I think at the March meeting, we'll need to make a final decision one way or the other. Jamie, Robin, is there? Are y'all good with that? Any thoughts?
That's fine for me.
That sounds great.
Well, thank you again, Rick. I greatly appreciate everything you've done on this so far, and Austin too. Okay. Well, we will keep moving right along. Do we have an SGA report?
I do not think so.
Okay. Faculty report?
Um, Amber's not on here. No, we don't have anything from her either.
All right. PTO.
We do have a PTO report. It is in.
I think Paula's on
Paula,
too.
you want to speak to us?
Thank you for getting that report into their folder. I know it's been kind of a funky day with everything. Have you guys had a chance to look at the report?
Yes, I know I looked over it. I don't know if anybody else has had a chance.
With the change of the calendar, we're going to have to change the March 28th was our big wellness day, and so that's scratched. And there's no more teacher work days, so I'm not sure when we're going to be able to do that.
We'll talk. We'll figure something out.
Yeah. And we rescheduled what we were going to have tomorrow until Monday's teacher work day. And we're going to start Raise Craze in April. And before you know it, guys, it's going to be June. Any questions for me?
Does June mean when weather's coming?
I hope so.
I like that y'all are including the secondary group too when I was reading. That's such a hard age, so good for y'all.
We have high hopes and high expectations for them. I know they can help us pull through this year.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's a team effort.
For sure.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you for all you continue to do and the team you work with. Coordinators reports.
All right. I'll just touch on a few things from the heads of school. Let's see. Children's House did their Valentine's Day community outreach at St. John's. That is always such a sweet day. They sang songs and recited poems and gave little gift bags to all the residents there. So that's a really special event for them. Read Across America Week is coming up in a couple of weeks, and they always have lots of visitors coming in to see them and read to their classes. So that's always a fun week. Any questions about Children's House? Okay, elementary. Lower elementary has been collecting canned foods for Eagles Wings. They usually do that around Thanksgiving, but changed their timing this year. And let's see. Sorry, I'm reading this report. The lower L kids also went to the D2 Flight Training Center in New Bern, and apparently it was an absolutely fantastic field trip. And it was they were the first visitors they'd had, so they said it was really cool. One other thing that Kathy touched on was the growth from MAPS testing in elementary. So we've been doing a lot, the teachers have been doing a lot with their students to give interventions and lots of review. And there was really good growth that happened in elementary with the MAPS scores. A few field trips coming up for elementary. Lower L is going to the refuge, and upper elementary will be going to New Bern. And those are both April trips. And then the 6th grade end of the year trip will be in May. Any questions on elementary? Okay. Middle school, this year they are doing, instead of the Scholastic Book Fair like we've had in the past, they are trying something new and doing a Barnes and Noble book fair where students go to Barnes and Noble and they can purchase books, and we get a percentage of the proceeds. They are planning their end of year trip to Virginia, which will be in May. And they're looking at some more fundraisers to raise money for their field trips. I know they're going to have a movie night in the next few weeks. Actually, it might be next week for upper elementary students. and they are working away on Kids Fest and their projects. Any questions about middle school? High school, the seniors went skiing and had a wonderful time. Just a few minor injuries, but everybody's okay. They had a really good time. They are planning a unity trip for this spring, and they have gone. I know they went and looked at one prom venue, so they're trying to figure out their prom plans. The high school also hosted for eighth grade families an informational session that had a great attendance. They just talked about what high school looks like and all the opportunities that we have to offer. We talked about dual enrollment and career and college promise and all the good things that we do. So that was a great night. I think that's it. Any other questions?
All right, you can keep rolling into the director's report.
I will. Okay, so you can see I've just put our enrollment for next year as if every single person moved up to the next grade. And so these numbers will change, but it's just sort of a ballpark. We have gone ahead and offered some lower and upper elementary slots for next year. That is not reflected in here. So just a ballpark. These numbers will probably change a bit, but we're looking at 442, including the preschool.
With the offers you've extended, have you extended any in the children's house, or are you gonna leave those numbers where they are?
We're taking children's house as they come in. So we've had several since lottery.
Okay, I just noticed you had 9 on the wait list here.
That is not, I'm sorry, that's for this year. The wait list is this year's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got
Okay. Um, let's see.
Do you quick question. I know in the past we talked about, doing more outreach in that 6th, 7th grade. Have you seen any you luck there as we get kind of halfway through the school year? Do you think we'll have a better retention rate than what we've seen before? Or
I do. I do. Yeah. They have done a couple of things together, the 6th and 7th grade. And we're looking at what our moving up procedure is. Certainly for the 8th graders moving up to high school, and then for the 6th moving to 7th. I've been talking to the upper elementary teachers about just some strategies to kind of let the grades intermingle a little bit more. So we don't really have anything set in stone yet, but we've gotten positive feedback so far from 6th graders. So, I mean, I'm expecting most of them to stay for 7th grade. Let me see, looking down. We are going to have our artisan fair in March on the 27th. So far we have 9 groups signed up. We'll definitely get more. Carol took some flyers downtown last week and left them at the what is that place called in the historic
The Harbor District.
Harbor District, yes. And visited some stores there. So hopefully we'll drum up some interest there. We did, like Rick said, we went to the Coalition for Charter Schools Summit, and it was really good. It was really well attended. We heard lots of different speakers. One of the main focuses was fair funding and facilities funding. And so it was kind of nice to be in the same room with people who have the same thing going on at their schools. So that was a good event. I went to the NC State Education Career Fair and picked up some resumes while I was there. And I'm going to go to the ECU Education Career Fair too. I think that's going to be a little more of our Eastern North Carolina niche. A lot of the NC State kids really were looking to stay more in the central part of the state. I was located pretty much right next to Wake County, and the traffic at their table was very different from ours. We had WITN came out and filmed for their ad, and just absolutely loved our school. Their producer came, and he just could not say enough wonderful things. And he said, I've lived here forever, and I didn't even know that this was back here. So we have some work to do, which is why we're doing an advertisement. And then the other marketing firm came and took some pictures. And they're going to be working with us on our website. So really looking forward to working with them. They've been great so far. And then also we learned recently that when people are going to buy a house and they look on the MLS, our school is not listed like the traditional schools are. So I reached out to somebody at the realty board, and she has fixed that. So we should be showing up when people are moving here, which I think will be a good thing for us as well.
That's awesome. I know when I bought my house last year, I noticed that, but never thought I just thought it was just something that's the way it was. But that's
Yeah, it was a quick fix. So, the summer service learning program for rising ninth graders, we're planning on having that. So we'll need to get some computers for that. And we had some good interest in that program for sure. In fact, the ninth graders went down and spoke to the eighth graders, or maybe to all the middle schoolers, this week, and talked about their experience with that program. So I think that's all I really have. Soccer has started for the middle schoolers. Let's see, the Honor Society will have their induction next week. If you scroll to the very end of the report, you can see our winter maps testing percentiles. So that's who has 40th percentile or less. I don't know that we need to harp over those at this very moment, but they're there if you want to take a look.
all right. Anything else, Austin?
I don't think so.
Any questions for Austin right now? All right, Rick, if you want to do budget finance, and then you can roll right into facilities after that.
Okay. Yeah, so on the funding side, if you all kind of look at I want to kind of put everybody's attention over at the year-end projected column. So, at this point, projecting basically when all of the funding is actualized, about 5 million up on the funding side of the equation. And obviously it's broken down by category there. On the expense side, same thing over to the year-end projected. Just about the same number, but the real variance in there is up to this point is our legal side. And that's a function of litigation we're currently in, one plaintiff, and we're not through the process with our carrier on defense attorney reimbursement yet in relation to our claims. So when you look at the expense number there year to date, and that's both of our attorneys, it's a big number, but that's a function. So when you look at that total expense line, that relationship where we're just a thread under would be under a thread under 5 million on the expense side includes that variance that's related to litigation at this point. And then just up to the next slide is just up to date between before and after school and day school. And and going back to when I look at back on the funding, so I did update for before, after school and day school. I did bring those projections down based on activities. So with before and after school, back up on the funding side, I budgeted about 72,000 based on last year. And that number appears to be a little bit, is not going to be 72,000, probably about 50,000 if you go back to the very first page on the funding side. And I did the same thing for day school because we're down to about, I think it's 6 or 7 day school students. So obviously that's less uh, preschool tuition at about 40,000. So um, but this just gives you the relationship in terms of current year, what we carried forward, uh, fees to date versus expenses, which is pretty much personnel, benefits and snacks and things like that. The last sheet, this is the cash report as of the 13th of February. And I kind of changed the order of this up. We went ahead and did move the 250,000 out of the day school account into the money market. So if you look at the first group, that's pretty much if you look at our operating account, down through WMPTO, on a daily basis, this is the cash we really operate on for you as the board to understand. When you kind of look at things, this is, and then with below that money market, CD, and the capital account, this is essentially our cash that's not aligned with operations. So I just kind of reorganized that relationship. And and I'm kind of thinking with the money market when we get to the end of February and basically the interest dividend applies. Um, it, I'm kind of projecting that that'll be about $900 a month as opposed to about 500 and change. So and then we'll see where the CD is once we get to April on the next 6 month renewal. But so if you kind of look at that snapshot, operating cash day-to-day basis, just under 300,000, and then what you call the school's cash that's not tied to operations, um, just under 725,000. Any questions on the finance report? Move on to facilities. But there's couple of points on facilities. We had that strong weather front come through last Sunday, you know, and 50-mile-an-hour downburst pouring rain, and we had water encroachment again on the two south-facing classrooms in upper elementary. So Tony's going to come out again and see, if we can uh, really get a handle, because every time this happens, we have basically a really kind of a downburst wind condition, very strong winds, hard angled rain for a good amount of time. Uh, the other side of Upper L was fine, so that's encouraging because it was about a year ago. It was all four classrooms, so I'm hopeful we're getting a little bit closer there. Um, uh, Part of the encroachment in one of the classrooms, to the degree it was, which is Miss Vick's classroom, could have been aided by the removal of the wisteria tree, the big wisteria tree that was like a week before that. So we had Mike come in and remove both wisteria trees. One was off of Anna's uh, classroom patio, and the other was on Miss Montana. So we had those removed. And then the electrical issue we've had in building four, the problem has been we've had like circuits that just don't work. And these circuits tie to you know outlets outlets not getting any electricity. So we had Ball Energy come out and take a look at it. And the bottom line is the the electric line running between the outside panel to the building had been completely compromised, just over time, deteriorated to where electricity wasn't getting up to the circuit where the circuit breakers were. And if it did, the breakers would just throw. So uh, essentially basically replaced the whole electric line, which one runs underground from the panel to the building. It was about $2,000 to do that. And so now all of those circuits are functioning. Because we had things where a lot of outlets didn't have power to them, and then finally a whole other circuit that went to both refrigerators in the building and a bunch of other things just didn't have any power either. So we had to make that fix. I think it was a couple of weeks ago they came out and did that. And that's it on facilities. Any questions?
And we're good. If you want to move on to the pro forma budget. If you want to move on to the pro forma budget, the next item.
Yeah, so it's in the discussion, right, Joseph?
Yes. Yep.
So essentially, basically, the budget you see for next year in the alignment for the financing uh, is almost the complete pro forma. So I'll come to the board next month in the March meeting with the pro forma budget for next year for you all to look at. Um, and so and and what I'll do in that budget is I'll kind of fold in that 30-year financing uh, for you all on the uh, that 30-year amortization. I'll kind of put that in there so you can all see it. Okay. All right.
All right. Austin, employee sick leave.
Well, that's me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rick. Good.
So, hey, I just wanted to discuss this briefly. So what I'll have is I'll kind of have a framework. I've been looking at this the last couple of years since I've been back. And so the short pitch for this evening is basically when I look at we've pretty much had it for years where staff get 10 PTO days a year, 8 hours a month, pretty much tied to the 10-month school year. And just looking at things in relation, if you want to call it a leave benefit, particularly coming out of COVID. I mean, uh, we've been hit. These post-COVID viruses seem to be pretty robust, and so we have a lot of staff that quickly chew through 10 PTO days, whether it's them themselves or kids or and but it's really not the driving force. But so where I'm getting at is, and I'll just bring this outline to the board next month is basically from a benefit standpoint, they're really I think there's merit to discussion with the board about adding a sick leave component to the year that in addition to PTO, just so that uh, you know uh, staff do have that option if they're taking a child to a doctor's appointment, people or staff have medical appointments. Like for me, just an example, last fall when my back went out, I had to go to PT, and that was probably all my PT sessions combined was probably 3 days. And so it's things like that too. So I'm just kind of noticing that I think this may be time where we consider adding a sick leave component in addition to PTO. But I'll bring that on next month. I just wanted to kind of verbally share at this point.
Okay. Anybody got any questions for Rick and Austin with the reports they gave? Okay. Well, I will entertain a motion for a 5-minute recess, and we'll reconvene at 8:15 in closed session.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Is that Jeremy? Second.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Any opposed? Okay. Hey, thanks everybody for joining tonight. Definitely appreciate your participation. Thank y'all.